Good afternoon, my soul family. I hope you're doing well. I want to do something a little bit different today. We're going to go back to Genesis chapter 3. And if you haven't read that for a while, please do, because it's really, really interesting. If you remember, in the creation, Adam was created, and then Eve was created, and they were told to care for the garden. And they were told, you can eat of all of the fruit in the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and except for the tree of life. And if you do, you will surely die. Now, think about that. If they eat of the tree of life, they'll live forever, ever. If they don't eat of the tree of life, they will die. They will die physically. But God said, if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and of the tree of life, or either one for that case, in that case, you will surely die. He wasn't talking about physical death, because they were going to die anyway. They hadn't eaten of the tree of life. But they would die spiritually. They would be removed from the presence of God. That's what spiritual death is. When God said, you will surely die if you eat of those two trees, he was speaking of spiritual death. You'll be separated from me. I won't be able to live with you anymore because you were disobedient. And then Satan comes along and says, God's a liar. You won't die if you eat of those things. And he was speaking of physical death, as in taking some poison and dying immediately. And that wasn't going to happen either, because those were good trees, good fruit. God only creates good fruit. What did happen, though, was Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden. And that's where they experienced spiritual death, because they became separate from God. And that was their punishment. What the chapter 3 in Genesis doesn't say is, and by the way, I want you to feel guilty and live in shame for the rest of your life. All too often, we fall into the trap of feeling like we're shameful and guilty and dirty because of Adam and Eve. We're not. Adam and Eve were punished immediately by being kicked out of the garden. And the Bible never says, because of that, I want you to live in shame and guilt for the rest of your life. And oh, by the way, your descendants will live that way too. God punishes people for their own actions, not for the actions of others, first of all. And Adam suffered spiritual death, and he suffered physical death because he wasn't immortal yet. So get those two deaths clear in your mind in Genesis chapter 3. God was speaking of spiritual death. I think Satan was trying to convince them of physical death, but they were going to die anyway because they hadn't eaten of the tree of life. So remember what the Bible doesn't say in Genesis chapter 3. You're not supposed to live in shame and guilt because of Adam. God never said that. He wants you to be happy, to be bountiful, and to have a wonderful, joyous life. And so do I. Stay close to the Lord, pray always, take good care of each other, and I'll see you again tomorrow.